very good person at one time.
I think you know about Mr. Montoya, because Mr. Montoya is not in Costa Rica. Mr. Montoya is not in Utah.
Rica.
Where is he? He's in that backyard, I believe, Dorothea. He is in that backyard, or he's been disposed of some other manner.
He is.
Can you imagine a sweet, elderly lady being the mastermind behind a series of dark and twisted crimes? In today's video, we'll unravel the shocking story of Dorothea Puente, a seemingly innocent grandmother who harbored a gruesome, secret crypt in her own backyard. We're diving deep into her life, her crimes, and the twisted methods she used to deceive her entire community. You won't want to miss this jaw-dropping tale that's filled with unexpected twists and turns. Stick around until the end to find out how this evil grandma duped her neighbors. Dorothea Helen Gray was born in Redlands, California on January 9, 1929. She was the sixth out of 7 kids, and her childhood was pretty tough. Her dad died from a lung disease when she was just 8 years old. The next year, her mom, who took to being a prostitute and was a raging alcoholic, died in a horrific motorcycle crash. After that, all the children were sent to an orphanage. At 16, Dorothea started to work in a motel in Olympia, Washington, where she made money working in a brothel. She met Fred McFall, a 22-year-old soldier when World War II ended. They got married in Reno, Nevada. But something strange happened. She used a different name on their marriage papers and said she was 30. It seemed like she could pretend to be anyone she wanted to be. Fred McFall said years later, "I can't understand how she came up with this crazy story out of nowhere." After 3 years of marriage, things started to go wrong for Dorothea and Fred McFall. Even though they had several kids, Dorothea didn't care for them. One child was given up for adoption, and another was sent to live with relatives. By 1948, Dorothea moved back to California, and Fred decided to divorce her. The following 20 years of her life were really chaotic. She got married many times, got into trouble with the law, and even spent time in jail. She was arrested for running an illegal business in Sacramento and also got in trouble for taking money from her renters' checks without them knowing. Puente often used different names to avoid being caught by the people who were supposed to watch over her. For example, she once said she was Teosingle Alanayarta, a woman from Israel and Egypt. Her fourth husband, Pedro Angel Montalvo, thought she was a doctor and actress from a large Mexican family. But their marriage didn't work out because she spent a lot of money. Montalvo said she would buy new pantyhose every day. The Sacramento Bee newspaper wrote that Dorothea believed she always had a lot of money. Puente began to slowly change her appearance. Before, she used to wear bold and attractive makeup and clothes. But suddenly, she started to dress more simply and stopped coloring her hair. She started saying she was a devoted Christian and liked welcoming people from the Sacramento community into her beautiful home on F Street. She helped those without a home, who struggled with alcohol or who had mental health issues. She even organized meetings for people dealing with alcohol problems, and social workers trusted her to help their clients. However, Puente was heading down a path that would eventually lead to her committing murder. After getting caught putting her name on checks meant for her tenants, she had to give up her first boarding house. In the 1980s, she worked as a caregiver for people and took care of them. But she did something terrible. She made them sick by giving them poison and took their things. She got put in prison for stealing in 1982. After 3 years, she was released from prison, even though a state psychologist said she had problems in her mind, didn't feel bad about what she did, and needed to be watched closely. Instead of changing, Puente opened another boarding house. She quickly went back to doing bad things. She let struggling people, called shadow people, live in her home. These were folks who didn't have a good place to live and didn't have many friends or family around. Some of them started to disappear, but nobody paid much attention. Puente said the people in her house were just visitors or friends, not actually living there, and even the officials who were supposed to check on her believed her. In April 1982, a 61-year-old lady named Ruth Monroe, a friend and business partner of Dorothea Puente, came to live in Puente's house. But sadly, not long after that, Monroe died because she took too much medicine. It had codeine and acetaminophen. The people who looked into these things talked to Puente. She said Monroe was feeling very sad and might have taken too much medicine on purpose. They thought Monroe had done this to herself and said it was a suicide. Just a few weeks later, the police got called to the boarding house again. This time, a 74-year-old man who lived there said Puente had given him something that made him feel strange. He also said she took things from him when he wasn't thinking straight. Puente had gotten into trouble in 1978 for taking money from her tenants' checks. She got probation for many years, but this time, she was given a prison sentence of 5 years. While in prison, Dorothea found an unsuspecting pen pal from Oregon named Everson Gilmouth, who was 77 years old. After she spent 3 years in prison, she got out in 1985. Gilmouth came to California to pick her up, and they planned to get married soon. But in November 1985, Gilmouth disappeared, and nobody knew where he went. Puente asked a worker to help her with some small jobs around her house. One of the things they did was build a box that was about 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. She said it was for throwing away some trash. The next day, she told the worker to put the big box in his truck so they could get rid of it on the side of the road. They went near the Sacramento River in Sutter County, and Puente left the box there. On January 1, 1986, a fishing person saw something that looked like a box floating on the water. They decided not to open it and instead called 911 for help. Inside the box, there was a man who had died. The man turned out to be Gilmouth, but it took 3 years for his family to find out what happened. Even after he died, Puente kept sending letters to his family, pretending to be him. People didn't start to think that Puente might be involved when a man named Alvaro Montoya, who was 52 years old, disappeared. Montoya had been struggling with his mind and didn't have a place to live for many years. Since Puente was known for helping people like him, he was told to stay at her house. Unlike the others who stayed at Puente's house, Montoya caught the attention of someone. When Montoya went missing, Judy Mose, a counselor with Volunteers of America, started to feel very suspicious. She didn't believe Puente's excuses, like the one where she said Montoya was on a long trip. Puente tried to give different reasons, like saying Montoya went to Mexico, but Judy Mose wasn't convinced and reported him missing. When the police came to Puente's house, they talked to her and one of the people staying there. The person initially supported Puente's story, but then secretly gave a note to the officer saying that Puente was forcing him to lie. Later on, the person spoke up and told the police that Puente had made prisoners who were on a break from jail dig holes in her yard and put concrete in some of them. This person also told the police about another person living in the house who had disappeared without explanation. This wasn't the first time the police had received information about Puente. They had heard before that Puente might be hurting and burying the people living with her, but they didn't take it seriously because the person who told them was addicted to heroin. In November 1988, police revisited Dorothea Puente's house in California to investigate further. While digging in the backyard, they found a decomposing foot and a human leg bone. Puente was questioned but denied any involvement with the body. She was released, and the next day, detectives returned to continue their investigation. Puente asked to meet her nephew for tea at a nearby hotel, claiming anxiety. They agreed, but she vanished afterward. A second body was found, and it was too late to apprehend Puente. In total, 7 bodies were discovered, some covered by sheets or tarps. Victims included Leona Carpenter, Montoya, Dorothy Miller, Benjamin Fink, James Gallup, Vera Faye Martin, and Betty Palmer. Neighbors had complained for months about a foul smell from the property. One neighbor described it as a sickly, sweet odor, and they were distressed by the discovery of the bodies. When questioned, Puente explained that what they found was just fertilizer. A taxi driver who often drove Puente around said she told him about a cursed room in her house where people kept dying from bleeding ulcers. Another neighbor mentioned how Puente acted like the property was hers, using rude words if anyone stepped on her lawn. A social worker even cried while talking to a newspaper, unsure if helping homeless people was right. Puente managed to escape while the police were searching for her. In Los Angeles, she targeted an older man at a bar who recognized her from the news about the murders and called 911. Puente was interested in him because she learned he got monthly disability payments. According to the Los Angeles Times, she was very evil. Mildred Ballinger, a social worker, said Puente rarely did anything good without an ulterior motive. Puente got arrested in LA, and a Sacramento TV station called KCRA used a private plane to cover the news. Detectives asked KCRA if they could bring Puente back to Sacramento on the same plane to charge her. KCRA agreed, but they wanted to talk to Puente on the way back. The interview was short and strange because detectives didn't allow questions about the killings. Puente spoke about how she used to do volunteer work in the past and quietly said, "I used to be a very good person at one time."
I used to be a very good person at one time.
In 1993, she faced trial for 9 murders. She denied killing anyone.
I think you know about Mr. Montoya, because Mr. Montoya is not in Costa Rica. Mr. Montoya is not in Utah.
Rica.
Where is he? He's in that backyard, I believe, Dorothea. He is in that backyard, or he's been disposed of some other manner.
He is. I believe in God, and I know he's going to show up.
They accused her mainly based on indirect things, like her criminal history and the bodies found at her house. The people who died had taken a mix of medicines, including one called Dalmane. Puente had lots of prescriptions for it, saying it would help her tenants sleep. It's tough to tell if she poisoned them or if they took too much medicine themselves. A jury member said Puente was really still and emotionless during the trial, like she was watching a movie she didn't care about. During her trial, Dorothea Puente was seen as either a kind grandmother figure or a smart criminal preying on vulnerable people. Her lawyers argued she might have stolen but not killed. The reasons for the victims' deaths weren't clear from pathologists' testimony. The prosecution, led by John O'Mara, brought in over 130 witnesses. They claimed Puente drugged her tenants, strangled them, and had prisoners bury the bodies in her yard. They said Puente was one of the country's coldest and most calculating female killers. She was found guilty of 3 murders and given a life sentence. In prison, she read books, watched TV, and wrote a cookbook titled Cooking with a Serial Killer. She died in 2011 at 82 from natural causes, reported the Los Angeles Times. Her ashes' location remains a mystery. Puente maintained her innocence till the end. In 2009, she told Sacktown magazine, "They don't know everything. They never talk to me. Nobody would choose this kind of life, but God always puts challenges in people's way." She also said, "When people came to stay with me, they got healthier. I made them bathe every day, change clothes, and eat 3 meals. When they came, they were so sick, they were expected to die." The house at 1426 F Street has become a strange memorial for Puente. After she died, the house was sold at an auction for $215,000. The new owners of the infamous Death House sometimes put a fake Puente outside and have a sign that says, "Trespassers will be drugged and buried in the yard," oddly using the house's dark history as a reminder to curious would-be visitors.